come make this half patchwork, half applique quilt with me. I'm making it for a dear friend who's having a baby. Now, I'm doing patchwork squares in between my appliques, so I'm going to have a total of 12 blocks, 6 patchwork blocks and 6 applique blocks. The first thing I did was choose my fabric, cut them into 5 by 5 inch squares, and laid out my blocks like I wanted them to look. I needed 6 blocks of 16 squares. Now I'm sewing my blocks together. I picked up 2 pieces, put them pretty side to pretty side, sewed them with a 1/4 inch seam, following the edge of my fabric with the edge of my presser foot, back stitching when I started and when I stopped, and then I opened that up, added another one to it, did the same thing until I had rows of 4. And then I sewed my rows of 4 together. So I have 4 rows of 4 blocks for a total of 16. I did this 6 times until I had 6 quilt blocks. Then I took them to the ironing board and ironed. And ironed and ironed and ironed. Now, you don't have to iron your seams open to one side or the other is fine. You just really want them to be flat. And after you get them ironed, then take them somewhere and lay them out. I laid mine out like I want them. This is what our quilt is going to look like, and in the empty spaces will be our applique blocks. Now it's time to go and sew our appliques. I like to change the thread color to match the piece of fabric that I'm appliquing. So when I have a bunch of blocks to applique, I do all of one color at the same time. So I did all of the blue on all of the blocks, and then I came back and did all of the yellow, then the green, and then the red. So I sewed forever and didn't have anything done, but then all of a sudden it was all finished at the same time. When I'm appliquing, I do that with a zigzag stitch. I put my fabric under the center of my presser foot and I try to keep it centered all the way around whatever I'm appliquing so that my zigzag catches the very edge of the fabric. And I recommend that you do your zigzag stitch 2 times. Yes, going around the whole entire piece 2 times. If you've been around long, you know this story. If not, let me tell you. About 15 years ago, I made a Minecraft quilt for my little fella, and it was his favorite quilt. It was one of the first applique quilts that I ever did. Not long after he got it, the pieces started to fall off. He had caught the zigzag on something, the stitch unraveled, and off his pieces came, and he was devastated, and so was I. So now we go around twice, and you don't have that problem. Kind of like my grandmother terrified me if I didn't backstitch, my stuff would fall apart. I'm terrifying y'all. If you don't go around twice, your stuff will fall apart. And I'm changing my thread color for each of my colors of fabric, but if I only had white thread and I wanted to make this, I would do it with white thread. Now let's go lay our blocks down and see if we love what we have. Y'all, this is precious. Now it's time to sew it together and add a border, and we're going to be ready to quilt. I'm going to pick up my first row of 3 and I'm going to sew those together and lay it back down, and then my second row and 3rd row and 4th row. After I've sewn my blocks into rows, then I'm going to sew my rows together, and then we have to choose the perfect fabric for our border. I've chosen these 2 fabrics, and I want 2 borders. I'm going to have a narrow border and a wider border. I'm going to sew the first one all the way around and then the wider one all the way around. And I'm sewing all of this the same way with a 1/4 inch seam, a straight stitch, back stitching when I start and when I stop. Our quilt top is finished. We're going to add it to the pile to be quilted and get started on our next project. My name is Tammy. I'm your favorite sewing teacher, and I would love for you to come sew with me.